Choice Conversations. I'm your host, Chris Stefanick. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Adele Faber. She is the co-author, along with Elaine Mazlish, of the best-selling book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk, Siblings Without Rivalries, and several other parenting books. Now, Adele, I had an experience with her that I'm sure other podcasters can relate to. You have all these interesting people on your show and so many things you can talk about, and you call them up and you're getting ready to start the show, and you get into this great conversation. You've not yet started the show. So that's actually very common when doing these interviews. And you would think I would learn by now to just immediately when I call someone to say, we're going to start the show now, and then it's all captured. But at any rate, I called up Adele, and we started talking, and 5 minutes into it, we're saying to each other, this has been a really good conversation. This should be in the podcast. So we just decided to include it. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and cut right in on our conversation just about a minute into the call.
Is there anything in particular you had in mind before we get started that you wanted to talk about, or just...
I want to ask you about you. Where are you coming from? God, as I look very casually at what you've done, I see you kind of morphed into the parenting arena full time. And I just sort of wondered about it, because for a while you were pretty wide-ranging.
Right.
And I wanted to know about your kids, and how old are they? and tell me something so I have a little baseline of who I'm talking to.
Sure. So originally the podcast used to be called Two Beers with Steve, and it was ran by a guy named Steve Patterson.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point along the way, I came on as a co-host with him.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of politics and economics and things like that we discussed. It was actually me that was encouraging him to go into parenting. You know, he has 2 children. I have one. I have a 7-year-old daughter. We would have these great parenting conversations off air, and I'm like, there's a lot of great guests out there for parenting, so I just went out and started getting some. And then in the meantime, what happened is he ended up getting really busy and just really couldn't be a regular podcaster anymore. And he said, you can have it, rename it, do whatever you want with it. And so I went ahead and did that and was able to keep the old Two Beers with Steve listeners and start my own podcast.
Isn't that interesting? I just, life pushes us in different directions. It's interesting.
Right.
So here you are, and you're diving into this whole parenting field. And
I am.
And you're trying this stuff out at home. And what kind of little girl do you have there? You have a little 7-year-old. God, you've seen that whole amazing transition, isn't it, from that tiny little baby that you picked up at the beginning, and now you're 7-year-old. Wow.
Yeah. And she wears size 12 clothes. She just today, not today, but just this weekend, she got her first pair of women's shoes. I'm like,
whoa.
She's 7 years old and is wearing women's shoes. Like, oh my goodness.
Okay, so that's a bit of a shock. All right, and I'm just, and anything else you want to just tell me about that? I don't know, but you've given it a lot of thought, and it's been interesting to you.
Yes, absolutely. I started off parenting the way my parents had parented me, and they were authoritarian.
Mm-hmm.
They had spanked me, and, I was one of those people, it's embarrassing now, but I was just like, hey, they spanked me and I turned out all right, which is just such a wonderful argument.
Mm-hmm.
Not.
Do you remember any of the feelings after the spanking? I'm just curious.
When I was a child?
Mm-hmm.
No. I actually do not remember being spanked.
You don't? Mm-hmm.
My parents cowed me, and especially my father.
He what you? He cowed?
Cowed, like, made me submit, whatever that, the term? Maybe I'm mispronouncing it.
C-O-W-E-D?
I can look it up. At any rate, it's just dominated. They dominated me, and I submitted.
Huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how did you become this thinking, curious person that you are? You were dominated by a parent who was saying, this is the right way to think, and suddenly here is the little boy who was told what was right and what was wrong, suddenly digging into this subject, so that now he has podcasts on it.
Right.
And he can't get enough of it. What's going on with you, Chris?
Right.
Isn't it interesting?
Well, I guess there was multiple things that were happening at once.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it was one of those situations where you try everything, And then when you run out of ways to do it, when you're on your last straw, then you spank. It's like when you're failing, that's when you spank.
Yeah.
Which is so obvious to see now.
Yeah.
So I'd sit there, things just escalate, and then I'd spank. Because I just wouldn't come out with that right away because I didn't want to do it. And that was, I would feel terrible afterwards when I would spank her. It was not pleasant, and it wasn't effective. It wasn't actually fixing anything. So there was that, and I was noticing that I wasn't enjoying being a parent, when it came to discipline, and it wasn't working. At the same time, I was listening to other people's podcasts, not parenting specific ones, but more broad, ones that cover a broad range of categories, and occasionally they would bring this up. Parenting, one of the shows I really liked, parenting would come up on the show, and he started talking about all the studies that show just how terrible spanking is. The science is very firmly against it. And that got my attention, and then I started looking into that, and I said, okay, I've got to stop spanking, obviously. And then I kept floundering on for a couple more years.
Yeah, what do you do if you can't spank?
Right. I didn't really have any tools to go from there, and I didn't have any good books at first. Like I always said, the first good parenting book I read was How to Win Friends and Influence People from Dale Carnegie.
Yeah, sure.
And it's not a parenting book. It was just, but I noticed in there.
Yeah, but you could quickly you made the leap.
Right, and so what I realized, and this was something that was being said, like on this podcast I was listening to, where they said children are not treated equally in our culture. If you need the key to being a good parent is to treat them as equals. Started thinking, Dale Carnegie, these are just good ways to communicate with anyone, and that's why they work.
My teacher, Chaim Ganat, used to say parents and children are equal, not in competence, not in experience, but equal in dignity.
Right, and so all these things that, how I was treating my daughter, oh, you're not going to finish your dinner? Okay, well that's all right, but then you don't get a snack at bedtime.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, so how would that work with my wife? If I tried to pull that on my wife. This is just not how you would handle the scenario. So,
oh gosh.
And then I finally found some good books. That's when I really started turning the page. Like the first one was Parent Effectiveness Training, and then pretty shortly after that I found yours, and some others since then. But that's kind of how I've gotten to where I am now.
Well, you've been on some journey, Chris. You've really been on a journey, and I can appreciate it because because I shared part of that journey. When do we officially go on? Because now you've told me about yourself. Are we?
I can go ahead and start it up here.
Well, that's fine. That's just fine. No, because you know what? I think that would be. I think people would really relate to your journey as you're busy interviewing all the people you're interviewing. I think people would really connect with your experience. And it's the journey that many people are trying to make and have not made, sadly enough, but it might inspire them.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Well, the format of the show, it's very casual. We just have a casual conversation.
Okay.
I mean, I could even take what we just did, what we just talked about, and put it in the show.
I think I didn't want to interrupt you because I thought, God, that was so great.
Right.
And I just reminded me of I was talking in someplace in Canada, and a man stood up and he said, I wonder what you would say to this, because I have trouble because, whenever I spank my child, at the end I use the paddle and when it's all done, I explain why I did it, and then I kiss her, and we make up, and then she feels better, but the other day she was invited to a sleepover, and she was excited about going, and I thought it would be okay for her to go. And then just before she left, she said, Daddy, you didn't pack my paddle. What will I do without my paddle? And if you're silent at the other end...
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
That's just how I felt, Chris. It's like she What does that say to you?
It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's like I need you to, to manage my life. I mean, what a sad story. No, just you'll know what to do. You don't need my paddle. You don't need any paddles. I'm throwing away the paddles.
Right.
Oh gosh. All right. That's it's big changes for us to make, and yet kids drive us crazy. They just do. I was just thinking of when with all your knowledge and all your good intentions, when I went to my own teacher, I studied for practically 10 years with Dr. Chaim Ganat. He was an amazing guy. He came from Israel. He spoke with this heavy accent. When I first heard him, I thought he was a kind of a joker. I couldn't even take him seriously. He said, "Did you know if Columbus had discovered America, pardon me, if Columbus had listened to his mother, he said America never would have been discovered."
Right.
He probably said to him, "Columbus, oh darling, don't go. It's dangerous out there. There are sea monsters. You'll get to the edge. Whoop, down you'll go. Stay home, study. We'll get you into a good college. You can become a doctor." So the audience laughed, and I thought, who is this clown here? And then he said, love is not enough. Parents are on the firing line 7 days a week, and what they need is not more love. They need skills. And then he talked about very, specific, coping skills, communication skills that he said would make a real difference in that parent-child relationship. And whoa, I mean, there I was taking notes. You can substitute a choice for a threat. What happens when we threaten a kid? When we say, if you do that, if you play with that ball in the living room once more, I'm going to. And he said the kid doesn't hear the whole sentence. He hears, play with the ball in the living room once more. And to him, it's an invitation, a challenge to do the thing that's been forbidden. So, what can we do instead? We said we can offer a choice. Billy, let's see, not in the living room. Hey, no ball playing in the living room. Let's see, where can you play? You can play with it in the front of the house outdoors or in the backyard. You decide, whichever you prefer. I mean, and I listened to all this stuff. He went on and on for an hour, and tried things out in the following week, and lo and behold, it was quite amazing.
Right.
I feel like going into a whole long song and dance, but you don't want me to, to tell you about all the early changes that I made. But I'll pause now.
Right. Well, it's interesting.
What?
You mentioned teaching these skills. When I read your book,
yeah,
how to talk.
I want to know what hit you there, or if anything did.
Well, yeah, definitely some things hit me. But I mean, one of the things that occurred to me is when you follow the methods that you detail in your work, you're teaching your kid good skills by modeling. So if you're just sitting there being an authoritarian parent or a permissive parent, what skills are you teaching them? You're teaching them how to be aggressive, how to essentially bully. Authoritarianism is bullying kids. You're teaching them that. Or if you use what you advocate in your work, you're teaching negotiation, problem solving, self-awareness, being able to identify your own feelings, empathy, identifying the feelings in others, and you're modeling this behavior to them. And of course, that's going to be the best way for them to learn it, is to see it in action.
Is to live it.
Right.
Is to live it, yeah. Every day, all around me.
Right, and there's all these just wonderful skills you're teaching by being a good parent that you're just not seeing when, if in the traditional way of parenting, the parent gets, is bullying, they get frazzled and lose their cool, or, there's all this stuff that and they're seeing that's how you behave. They're learning that.
It really is a win-lose kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to win. And this is a very different way of thinking. I was just so delighted. I just looked up by numbers on Amazon the other day, and it said the book was #1 in conflict resolution.
Oh, wow.
I mean, what was that, conflict resolution? I didn't write a book about conflict resolution. And then I thought a moment, and I thought, yeah, I guess I did.
Yeah.
Because it really is, your feelings, my feelings. And by the way, kids can't listen to your feelings really until you've heard theirs. And it's fascinating, all the people who have written, in these areas since. I'm just thinking of my daughter and what did she do when she went to teach. We didn't talk about when you talked about punishment. One of the big alternatives to Frank Gannat would say, the child who's just been punished does not go to his room and say, God bless my mother and father who just punished me. When I grow up, I want to be just like them.
Right.
Instead, he thinks they're mean, I hate them, I'll get back at them. He has a little revenge fantasy. Or he thinks, I'm so bad, I deserve to be punished. And so, all of those outcomes are pretty bad. But the other alternatives are not easy. And I'm just was so tickled because my one of the things my daughter did when she went into teaching, she ran up against some of these really tough situations in school, and she said her kids were really horrible. She was a special ed teacher. In the classroom, they were just terrible, constantly fighting and calling. Oh God! And so she started with. She said, "I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do." I said, "Would you do any problem solving with the group?" And she said, "With the class?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Oh." She said, "Okay, good idea." And she came back the next day, she told me what she did, and. She started by saying, I want to know how you feel about fighting. And she said, let's start with what's good about fights. Isn't that great, Chris?
Yeah.
She started out by acknowledging that there might be something good about it. And if there is, let's explore it. And the kids came up with 10 things that were good.
Right.
They said, she told, this is in Harlem she's teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like getting back. That was the number one thing. Getting someone in trouble. Getting someone to chase you, snapping, which means insulting, is funny. They won't mess with you again. You feel like it. They start up first. Class is boring. Getting someone mad. It's fun to play rough. Those were their 10 ideas.
Right.
And then she said, okay. She said, now let's see what's bad about fights. And she said, well, they listed 8 things there. After you fight, you feel bad if it's your friend. And the second one is you can get in trouble with your mother, the teacher, the principal.
Right.
3, she put in the third one. It puts your teacher in a bad mood.
Right.
4, they said you can hurt somebody. You can get suspended. You don't get to learn. Class is interrupted. It could start a worse fight. You could get bitten, beaten up, scratched, black eye. They really got excited. And then with possible solutions, you know how many solutions this class came up with? 19.
Nice.
It was unbelievable. Asked to go out and let off steam. Number 2, hit him. 3, walk away. 4, pound the clay. 5, squeeze hand grippers. 6, break a stick. 7, call his mother. 8, let them fight it out in the gym with no crowd.
Right.
9, tell the teacher. 10, change your seat. 11, tell him to leave you alone. 12, send him to the office. 13, make him write 100 times. 14, make him lick the floor. 15, everybody hit him once. 16, give stickers to the ones who follow the rules. 17, write something mean to him. 18, punch the board. 19, say something nice back to him to make him embarrassed. Well, she went over the whole thing. She said, well, let's see how we feel about each of these. And, make them lick the floor. That wouldn't be very sanitary, so we'll have to cross that one out so they know little by little. that little, crossed out everything, and they had the final rules that they agreed to. Number one was no insults. They wrote them on the board, the final rules. No insults, no curses. Don't tell on anyone unless they are bothering you. No hitting or throwing. And then the final thing was use your own solutions, because each student decided upon his own solutions and listed them in the book. So that was it. And she said, and every once in a while somebody would say, number 2, number 3.
Right.
And they would just call out, and that's what did it. I was just blown away by that. Are you impressed? You impressed with my little girl?
Well, it's great. It's great on so many levels. There's, including them in solving the problem.
Yeah.
I'm an IT manager by profession. And
what IT? What is that?
Oh, information technology.
Oh, okay.
So I lead a team of computer professionals, and we have a number of clients, and we provide services to them. And what I will do is, if there's a problem, I'll call a team meeting. We talk about the problem. We brainstorm of what things we can do. First of all, we talk about, is this a problem? What's the pros and cons of what this situation is, like they just did in the classroom. Then we say, okay, what can we do about it? And together we come up with a solution. And it works really well for a number of reasons. One, you actually get better solutions.
Yeah.
Because even if I'm the smartest one out of my team, I'm not smarter than myself plus their added intellects. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I'm not using all my resources if I don't include them in the decision. And then they can actually identify the problem. If you just come out and say, look, there's this problem, if you're not helping them to identify themselves to come up with the pros and cons, maybe they won't even see it as a problem. But if you ask them and they put on the board, why it's bad, why this situation's bad, then they start to see it themselves rather than having it, dictated to them. And then they're like, okay, then they're motivated to solve it because now they believe it's a problem. So now you come up with better solutions because you're including more people, and you get buy-in because they don't feel like this is just a decision handed down from on high, from a central authority. Well, I didn't want to do that. That was a dumb decision. This is a dumb fix to that problem. And they go at it half-hearted or consciously or unconsciously try to sabotage it or whatever. But if they're included in the decision and they agreed upon it, then they kind of have to support it because they're like, well, that's what I agreed on doing. I can't say that's a stupid decision because I've agreed to it. Then I'm saying.
Well, not only I agreed, and but I'm invested in it. It's my idea.
Right.
I've got to make it work.
Right.
And and if it doesn't work and it's not working, then hey, how do I tweak it? How do I fix it? Or do I just throw the whole thing down the drain? And life is a process. It's a process, and we have to respect that fact, and the failures are to be treasured, as opposed to now look what you did.
Right.
And I love the whole notion of when a kid makes a mistake to just turn it into a discovery.
Right.
Look what you found out. That is so nice.
We had talked about earlier how the best tactics for children, they're typically they're good tactics for anyone. And so that's like an example there. What works for me and my team as an adult professional works in the classroom because children aren't different. The children are just size deficient.
Size deficient. Oh, God.
Maybe they lack some experience, but often, even with lacking that experience, they can come up with better solutions to the problem than you can.
Because they have a fresh eye. They really have a fresh eye, yeah.
Sure. They know the situation better than you. I mean, if it's about themselves, if the situation is involving them, they're more intimate with that situation than you are, and all the ramifications that it has on them.
Yeah. It just makes me laugh because I'm thinking of when my daughter had her firstborn, and it was about 2.5. He was a little more than 2 years old, and he had been toilet trained. How wonderful. And then suddenly he wasn't anymore, and and it was like all over the place whenever he wanted to. And but if he did it on a carpet, he very cheerfully cleaned it up. He liked the whole process of cleaning up. And and she called me. She said, "Mom, what'll I do?" And I said, "Well, you know what I do when I don't know what to do." And she said, "You mean problem solving?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "But you can't do that with a 2-year-old." And she said, "Oh," and she hung up. and then about the next day, I found out what happened. She sat down with him and said, "Danny," she said, "I think we have a problem here." She said, "You like to go whenever you want to go, right?" And he said, "Yeah." And she said, "I don't like all the cleaning up, so what can we do to solve this? Let's see. We need 5, what did she say? We need 5 ideas, 4 ideas, I don't know." And she said, "Let's see. We can, I'm trying to remember this thing. At any rate, once we looked around the room, and he said his eyes lit upon the little souvenir that she had of the Statue of Liberty. It was like a little green souvenir. And he looked at it, he said, "Well, the green man will tell me when to go."
Right.
And she said, "Oh." She thought to herself, she says, "And what will he say?" And he said, "Pee-pee in the pot." And she said, "Okay." She said, "Anything else?" And what else do they work at? Chris, this is a long time ago. I think it was like the man in the window will tell me. And what will he say? Doo-doo in the pot. I don't know. Some weird thing,
Right.
nothing anybody would ever come up with in their right mind. And she said, and then, like hours later, he's sitting at the table, he's sort of dancing around, holding on to himself and then she takes the Statue of Liberty and puts it up to his ear, and he sort of listens to it, and he runs off and does it in the pot. And she says, and for the next few days, she said she goes around with it in her diaper bag. And a friend who was from Sweden, she said, "Oh my, aren't we patriotic? Should I be carrying my flag?" The point is that even a 2-year-old could. It's my idea. You get ownership in it, and you want to go ahead with it.
That kind of reminds me of the part in your book you talk about say it in a word.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, so people who aren't aware, there's a tactic in How to Talk So Children Will Listen where they say kids hate lectures and long and drawn out things, and if you can say it in a word, it's much better. And they give like this example of, "Now, Tommy, I told you to put your pajamas on. You know what time it is. Now, you had promised we were going to do this without having to go through a bunch of rigmarole." Now, this whole long thing. And then he said, "Now compare that to, Tommy, pajamas."
Yeah, good night. You should say, what is it? Rudolph Dreikers, I think, was the author who said, he wrote Children's Challenge a long time ago, and he said, the problem with parents is they talk too much. And Chaim Gnat used to say, whatever you can say in a paragraph, say in a sentence. Whatever you can say in a sentence, say in a word. Whatever you can say in a word, say in a gesture. He would just point. Or, but the notion of a single word is just really wonderful. Really wonderful. Oh, I have to tell you, when I was on, it just reminded me, when How to Talk was first written, I was, going around the whole country and giving radio interviews and television interviews, and finally we landed, Elaine and I landed a spot on Good Morning America. Oh God, it was so exciting. And the whole nation was going to be listening to us. And we did the show, and everybody seemed to love it, and boy, was I on a high. I came home, and I had told there was my 16-year-old lying on the sofa when I got back, and there was the dog who hadn't been out for since probably the night before, and just whining at the door. And I looked at him, and I looked at that poor animal, and I went out of my mind. I just went crazy. I just could not stop yelling. I cannot believe you could be so insensitive to an animal suffering, and you were lying there. I just couldn't stop. I was screaming at the top of my lungs. And he gets up and he says, Mom, he says, I just heard you this morning. I just heard you today on Good Morning America talking about the virtues of the one-word statement. So I looked at him, and I said, "Session!" And he said, okay,
Right.
he said, I'm doing it now. And as he left, I thought, what a wonderful skill this is. You can use it when you're feeling like, Honey the dog. And you could also use it when you're feeling out of your mind, crazy rage. And it works every time.
Right.
So yeah, that is a lovely skill among the others. That is a lovely one.
The Statue of Liberty reminded of it because it's just like a gesture. The kid liked that so much better than alternatives.
Yeah, because they come up with their own ideas, which is so very different from ours. I can't sleep. There are monsters in the room. So what can we do? What can we do? Instead of there are no monsters in the room. Come on. What did one kid say? I know when she did some problem solving. She says, I know. The kid said, I'll go to sleep with mittens. Oh, mittens will help you? Yeah. How do the mittens help? Oh, because the monster bites your fingers. And if you have mittens on, he can't get to your fingertips. Oh. And there it was.
Yep.
So for a few nights he went to sleep with mittens, and that did it.
Right.
But can you imagine a parent coming up with that?
Right.
Never in a million years.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. So that's it's so exciting, Chris. When I launched on this, I really did, plan to take a little 6-week course and stayed on for close to 10 years just because I couldn't get enough.
Right.
It's just so interesting. How do we get the human race to act more, to figure out how to live together without killing each other?
Oh, well, it's not just education, I'll tell you that. So you had given the example where you came in and you were so furious about the dog. That reminds me, I mean, now I have these skills. I've read your book. I've read some other books that are really, high quality, like PET. And so I know these skills.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When I fail to use them, when I fail as a parent, it's always me not being self-aware. It's me letting my anger take over, and then I just toss them to the side. The skills I know, they don't even come up, or if I think about them, I'm too angry to use them.
Chris, that's it. That's what happens,
right.
And we have to be respectful of our anger. I mean, that's what's so good about these skills, is they kind of force you to get in touch with yourself.
Right.
They do. So that maybe you can catch the thing before you get into that state. Because when you get into angry land, I mean, your whole, I don't know what goes on in the brain. I just know you get flooded with some basic hormones, or what do they call them, stress hormones, whatever it is. You go into another place. What is it, the amygdala? Is that what they call it? And it's fight, hit, attack, and you can't think of anything else. All you want to do is say, you. Now look what you did. You did it again. What is wrong with you? How many times do I have to tell you? I mean, you just want to attack, and every skill goes out the window. I can't believe you did that again. We discussed this 1,000,000 times, and you're still doing it.
Right.
I mean, it's an outcome the use. You did it. You'll never learn. What is wrong with you? You is a good. That's a good dagger word, isn't it? And forget about the PETI messages.
It's jackal language. In the words of Marshall Rosenberg, he would call that jackal language.
Jackal language? Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Jackals, yeah.
So I don't know if you're familiar with his work.
No, but that's good. Jackal. But it's important to be aware of that part of yourself that can can go into action. And sometimes there is in my upcoming little book, which I'm How to Be the Parent You've Always Wanted to Be, which will be coming out in October. Ho, ho, ho.
Excellent.
Where was I? We were talking about anger, yeah. Sometimes we will explode.
Right.
But that's okay. It happens, But if you can just think about it and say to yourself, oh, gee, why did I do that? I could so easily have done this. There was no reason for me to get so crazy. There's 5 other ways I could have handled this. But that's fine. That's fine, because the beauty of this approach is there's always the next day.
Right.
And there's always the opportunity to say to a kid, boy, I think I really upset you when I said that.
Right.
And I've been thinking about that, and I don't like what I said, because I know it had to hurt you.
Right.
And so, here's what I want to say, and then do it, and then say it. And what it does is model for the youngster a way to come back when they're in a rage. I have to laugh, because I was thinking of one woman coming into Dr. Ganato and saying, Dr. Ganato, I was so mad at my kid, I didn't know whether to hit him or kill him. And he said, if there's ever a choice between hitting and killing, he said hit.
Right.
He said, but what do we teach the kid when we turn him over at our knee and say, with each blow, this will teach you once and for all, whack, whack, never to hit anyone smaller than yourself. Right. So she said, so what do I do when I'm in that crazy rage? And he said, I would say, I am so angry. I am so angry. I am about to hit. So run for your life.
Nice.
That was pretty cute. That's Chaim Ganot. That's why I had to stay with him. He's endlessly inventive.
Marshall Rosenberg, he wrote Nonviolent Communication, and he's actually a disciple of a guy named Carl Rogers.
Oh, yes, of course.
Right, so Thomas Gordon, his work is very similar to Thomas Gordon, who's also a disciple of Carl Rogers.
And Carl Rogers was that was Chaim Ganot's source of inspiration.
Right, so there's a lot of crossover, like your works, Rosenberg's, Thomas Gordon, they all have active listening, passive listening, and the like. Mm-hmm. They each have their own additional twist on it. There's something to be learned from all of these different works out there.
Yes,
but,
yes.
There's also some similarities.
Yes.
But what he says, if you find yourself not able to do like active listening or to use iMessages, not able to use what he would call nonviolent communication, he said it's probably because you need empathy yourself. Your need for empathy is greater than your ability to be able to communicate with nonviolent communication.
I like that. I really like that. That's nice.
So what he said to do, if you find yourself in those situations and you're about to say something that later you're going to regret that you said it, you need to pull yourself out of that situation and give yourself empathy. So what I will do now is if I'm at that point where I know I'm gonna yell, I know I'm gonna do something I regret, I will say to my daughter, right now I'm really upset and I need some time alone. I know we still have some things to talk about here. You're upset too. Right now I'm not capable of talking about this. Give me a few minutes alone and then we'll come back and we'll finish this later. And I'm able to do that. If I have to actually try to use the skills, but I'm so flustered and so angry, and I've got so much history of not using them, using these skills that you teach, that Carl Rogers teaches, they're not my native language. That's not what my parents used with me. So it's not when you, in times of stress, you default to, you go back to your native language. And
yes.
So if I try to do it, it'll end up failing, and I'll go back to my native language, and it won't go well. But I am able to, using my native language, remove myself from this situation. So that's kind of what I found that to be a really good insight from Rosenberg to help me to follow like the advice you give and the like.
That's interesting. That is interesting. One of the things that I reached for when I'm at that edge and I know I'm about to pop, is just to go for another voice or another accent, and to just do something slightly outrageous or silly or dopey, or just because it's like, because the energy.
Right.
And the voice, I go into like the gangster voice. Okay, you guys, this place better be cleaned up before chow time, or there's going to be big trouble around
Right.
here. Nobody puts on the feed bag until this job gets done.
Right.
You get it? This place ain't fit for hogs nor chickens. Let's get cracking with a mop and boom now, so we can eat our victuals like regular folk. Sometimes I'll go into an English accent. I just do it to him. I say, old chaps, dinner will be served at 6. Do tidy up so we can dine in comfort. Any of these things. The crumbs, opera style. I feel crummy from these crumbs. Quick help.
Right.
Just using the energy to kind of burst into another form.
That's great. It saves you from damaging the relationship by saying something hateful, by using jackal language.
Yeah.
And you know what else works well?
Tell me.
Is you had talked about using fantasy.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
The child wants ice cream. We don't have ice cream. I want ice cream. And they're like, boy, I wish I had a magic wand right now, and I would go poof and turn your cereal into ice cream. And they sit there and they, you get them to laugh and do, and that's works really well, and it's an easy skill to use.
That was one of Chaim Ganat's innovations, which was just, it is wonderful, and how richly you can give in fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
You want ice cream? I wish we had.
Right.
Magic fingers, and then you can add to it. We could have. How many ice cream balls would you like?
Right.
What flavor? Maybe we can mix them up, plop here strawberry, plop here vanilla. I don't like vanilla. Okay, get rid of it. We get rid of it. What do you want next? You suddenly...
You get the child into the fantasy.
Oh, they grab right onto it, yeah.
Right. Then their focus is on play.
Yeah.
It's on imagination, and it's not on whatever it is that was bothering them 2 seconds earlier.
Yeah.
And again, that's one of those that's easy to do naturally. A lot of people, when doing empathic listening and creating like iMessages, they're so not used to it. It doesn't feel natural to them. And
it's funny when you say creating
iMessages. I know.
Even just saying, could I create an iMessage? It just makes me feel tense.
Right.
Like, I feel so-and-so when you, the whole thing makes me nervous. Just the whole, I don't know, how would you think about it that would be easier? So you feel, so you're really, oh gosh, I'm just thinking, what would be more comfortable? It really bothers you. It just, yeah.
Right.
I hate school. Boy, you feel strongly about that.
Right.
I hate grandma. That is not a nice thing to say. I don't care.
Right.
I hate her anyway. How can you talk that way? Grandma loves you, and I don't love her.
Right.
Listen, I think you better go to your room now, and I hate you too. Oh boy. Whoa, what have we got there? And look what happens when we acknowledge the feeling. I hate grandma. Boy, something she did made you angry. Yeah, every time she comes, all she does is play with the baby. Hello, sweetheart, hello, darling, And then she says, and she gives the baby a toy, and she says, I don't know what to get you anymore, and she gives me $2 for my bank.
Right.
Oh, so you don't want the money? No. You'd rather have a present like the baby? Yeah. Honey, do you wish you could go back to the way it used to be? When you were the only one? Yeah. And that's nice. That's really nice. And now she's even free to think about, or maybe even tell Grandma, Grandma, could you play with me the way we used to play when I was a baby? And it's interesting because when you cut off feelings, you cut off thinking. But when you listen to feelings, you really free thought to come. So, and free people to come to solutions or think about them.
Right.
So it's a really magical process, and one that we need to remind ourselves of over and over and over and over and over again.
So I'm curious, you talk about that, the reminding over and over and over again. I would think that if you were raised with these techniques, the behavior was modeled ideally from day one, but if not, at least from a young age, that it would then be natural for you, because that would be your native language then.
Oh, Chris, do I wish you had my new copy of the new book, or the newest version where my daughter wrote 50 pages, and and she thought that would be for her, and she became a teacher. I told you some of the techniques some of the things she used, and she was just a terrific teacher. And when she had her children, she thought, wow, I'm not going to be like all these other horrible parents. And then she found herself, and 3 children later, she found herself just so overwhelmed by the pressures and what was one of her examples? If you don't stop running away from me, I'm leaving without you. She found herself saying things like that, and wishing she could, and she just sort of stunned at how parenting can reduce you to a very basic savage state. And it took a real effort on her part but the skills were there to make a difference when she needed to. They were there for her, and that was good, and that's what helped her. But it is a process. It is a process, and she made many other discoveries along the way, which you can read in her edition. Do you think I'm trying to promote my updated edition of How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk? Yes, I am. So there we are.
Yeah, I'll be sure to put links to all of that in the show notes so the listeners can easily get to it. So.
Okay.
One last thing I wanted to talk to you about before I let you go.
Okay.
You talk about how it's important not to put children in roles.
Oh, yeah.
And this is one thing I've now I reread the book in preparation for this interview, and I got to that part, and I said, you know what? I'm doing that. Damn it. My daughter is, we talk all the time about her. She's a whiny kid. And talk to her about it. And what can we do to get you to stop whining? Oh, that's just how I get, whenever I'm upset, Dad. I just whine. And I'm like, we can sit down and negotiate. We can do, try to find a win-win solution. But please, just stop whining. Let's talk about that. I can't take the whining. And then I read that, and I'm like, damn it, I put her in the whiny kid role. And I keep enforcing it over and over and over again. So, why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, whining. I had a whining child. It's funny. I just when I was doing a radio program in Canada, and somebody said, one caller said, "What do you do about whining?" And I gave my best answer, which I'll tell you about later. And another man called up and he said, he said, there's no problem with whining. He says, when one of my grandkids whines, I just put him on my lap and I think I'm a lonely little petunia. And I said, how does that go? And he said, I just sing, I'm a lonely little petunia in an onion patch, an onion patch, an onion patch. I'm a lonely little petunia. And he says, and by the time I get to the 3rd verse, he says, they stop whining. And I thought, well, it's not a standard solution, but it does accept the child's feelings, that she's feeling like a lonely little petunia in an onion patch. And then I thought of I don't know if you remember the the old Saturday Night Live shows where they would, one would say, the couple was the whiners, and he would say, "What do you want to do tonight?" And she'd say, "I don't know. What do you want to do? There's nothing to do around here." And I thought that really is a rather natural way to talk when we're feeling,
Right.
And so another, one of the, trying to think of what I did. Gosh, there's one of my very first book, Liberated Parents, Liberated Children, had a whole section on my youngest who did whine, and that was a long process. But what did I do? I'd say, Abe, I said, how about, it was hard for me to listen to that, when you want something. Could you use your other voice? Could you tell me in your other voice, and to be easier for me to listen? Mom, I have nothing to you. I tell him about my books. Could you take me to the store? Could you just tell me? That's what he'd say. Could you say something like, "Mom, I've got a problem. I really need a new notebook." That would really help me to listen. So, he would start out and say, "Mom," I say, other voice, and then he would make a little effort, and then my real reward came when he was about 16 years old or so, and he was doing a play. He was actually directing a little play, and it was going to be produced that evening. And whoever opened up the building didn't open it up so that they couldn't do their dress rehearsal or whatever it is they had to do before the show. And he was so upset, and he was just going into whining mode. And he said, "I told him not to, and he still didn't. I reminded him and everything." And then he said, "I'm going to call." And then he called, and he said, "Mr. Rosenberg," he said, "we have a problem here." He said, "Can you help me with it?" Whoa. Whoa. At least he learned. He learned that he can't do that when he's dealing with the world.
I've said that to my daughter. I said, "Is this how you talk to your teachers? Is this how you talk to your friends?" "No." I'm like, "Then why do you do it to me?" I'm like, "Who do you love more, your teacher or me?" "You." "Then why do you treat me like that?"
Why don't you just whine back to her? And say, "I don't like it."
Oh, I've done that before, but
she doesn't like that.
Well, she doesn't like it, and I don't really feel good doing it.
Yeah, you don't like it. Yeah.
It feels like jackal language to me when I do it back.
Yeah. Other voice, just tell her, other voice, please, other voice.
I'm going to try that. I'm going to say, why don't you try,
other voice.
Give me an imitation of somebody, anybody, but you're not Morgan right now, you're someone else. Speak in that voice and just see if that'll work. I'll tell her, I'm going to say, I was talking to a parenting expert. She's written several books, and this is what she said to do. Because my daughter, she knows I do this radio show and talk about parenting, and my daughter is actually reading PET right now. She's 7 years old and is reading it. So,
oh, my God.
She said, "I want to," because I was talking about it. She's like, "Well, tell me about what the show was about." And she's like, "Okay, well, can I read that book?" And I said, "Sure." So.
Oh, give her a copy.
Yeah.
Here I am, talking my book, because I have my cartoons, and she'll be able to see them, and they're fun to read, to look at.
Right, and that's right. You actually have some books specifically written for children, don't you? That you have Bobby and the Brockles, or.
Oh, Bobby and the Brockles, and Bobby and the Brockles go to school. Yeah, that's for the bullying kids. When they're young. Yeah.
Those are specific for bullying.
Well, it's also. Well, for the younger crowd, although, I don't know, older kids seem to like it. You could get that on my website, Long pause, because I don't know what to say to follow up to that. Where were we?
Oh, that's fine. I've had you on for almost an hour now, and I don't want to...
Really?
I'm having a wonderful time, but I don't want to...
Yeah, it is fun. It is fun. It's a fascinating, endless topic, and really interesting. When I hang up, I'll think of 10 more things you can do. Right. Only they don't come to me now. And every once in a while, I feel like whining. Did you ever just whine back to her?
Right.
I mean, in a friendly way. Not, I don't know what to do, because you don't know what to do, or you're feeling that. What does she whine? Give me an example.
Oh, let's see.
What might she say?
"Daddy, I'm getting my shoes. I'm we're late for school, and
Yeah.
I'm getting my shoes, I told you. And it's like, she's like going so slow, yeah.
You don't want me to rush you. You're tired of being rushed. And I'm trying to rush you. I mean, anything that, hey, Chris, anything that, humor, come on. I mean, that's,
Right.
Doing anything funny, crazy, silly. You don't want your father rushing you, but I have to rush you.
That's good. I'm going to have to try that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just anything that, breaks it up. Anything that, that is less technical.
Right.
As opposed to the I statement and the I message and everything else. Just break into anything. Break into song,
Right.
You don't want to be rushed. I need to rush you. You want to be left alone. Leave me alone. Whatever it is. I'm getting, and then whatever word you want to use.
Right. Well, Adele, if the listeners want to find out more, what's the best place where they can reach you and get a hold of your work?
Well, I guess they could go to my website. At this point, I should know the name of it. FaberMazlishWorkshops.com, is that it?
I think FaberMazlish.com will get you there. I'm looking at it right now, so.
Okay. Okay, good.
FaberMazlish. I'll put a link in the show notes. But, all right, well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been wonderful.
Okay, we had a good time. Okay. And thank you for being so sharing about your own family, because it makes it so much easier when you're having a real interview with a real dad.
Oh, sure. That's what the show is all about. It's choice conversations. It's for my own enjoyment, really. So, hopefully.
Isn't that nice that you can treat yourself to that? Look what you've done with your life. You've gotten yourself just where you'd like to be.
Yep.
For now, anyway.
Yeah. So if I can help somebody along the way, that's great. But in the meantime, I know I'm having fun. So.
Okay. I'm guessing that you're helping a lot of parents along the way, too.
I hope so. Thank you for being a guest on Choice Conversations.
It was truly my pleasure, Chris. You're a delight to talk to.
Oh, thanks. Take care.
Okay.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.